Hi and welcome. Thanks for joining us, where we will be showing you on a weekly basis some rigs and traces. As per requested, we've received so many requests on rigs and traces. And today's topic is something obviously I think most anglers out there are interested in, and that's catching edible fish. Now I'm going to start off with your basic trace that works every time. Okay, now with the basic trace, it's very straightforward, and this works for most edible species on our coastline. I'm talking about fish ranging from 2 to 10 kilos, your general size, and that you can change by changing the hooks. Just the hook size and the thickness of your snoot. Your snoot is your piece of line between your swivel and your hook. Now that will get you a bit later, but let's just start with the basic trace. Now, a nice length, the standard length for that type of trace is about 40 centimeters, nothing really longer than that. You rather make your sinker line longer, because we can clip these days with the sinkers, having this clip to cast with. So if you want to get more height in your bait, get it up a bit higher, you rather make your sinker line a bit longer. Now in general, just a nice average diameter, I use the Nylon Fluoro, as I've mentioned in clips before. The 0.66, which is 54 pounds, 24.5 kilogram. This is a very nice thickness. Now I'll go thinner if it's really calm, knowing kind of what species I'm targeting won't bite it off or break it off, and the sea is very clean. Then you'll go a bit more finesse, and when I say finesse, you'll use the 0.55 and thinner. And then for bronze bream specifically, in between the rocks, I use a 0.44, which is even thinner. And that makes a difference in your results. It really does. Now, very simple. You're going to take this, you're going to choose your hook. Now, as I've mentioned before, when it comes to edible fishing, the ring soy is the only hook I really put on. There's a lot of good hooks on the market, and a lot of ones you can consider. Now, this is the 4.0, which is nice for your fish 2 to 4 to 5 kilo type fish. You'll handle quite easily on this. I caught an eagle ray of 80 kilos on this hook. So it's not necessarily your hook size. Make sure that the more importantly is that your bait size suits your hook, so that your hook's still proud and you can get a hook up. The hooks they make these days, and especially these ringed soys, are so strong they can really handle big fish. But for the purpose of this rig, I'm going to use a 6.0, and as I mentioned earlier, you'll adapt your hook size to the species. Now, this exact trace I'll use for flatfish, even the diamonds and the honeycombs. When you're targeting 60 to 100 kilo fish, I'll just switch to an 8.0 or a 10.0 hook for that. If you're fishing for cob and bigger cob, you're going to use an 8.0 or a 10.0 hook with nice big baits. In general size, the 6.0 will catch you most of the species, and you can still catch a big cob on this. Now remember, a smaller hook can catch bigger fish, but a big hook, you're going to battle to catch smaller fish. So if you're putting a bait out there to get a bite and you want to get a fish, there might be a couple of species feeding in that condition, not just cob, then you'll still catch a 30 kilo cob on this hook, no problem, even bigger. Just match your bait to your hook size. But this is a nice general edible trace. It's just a 6.0 ring soy that I'll use. On this I'll use a figure of 8 knot. I've tested this, the polymer knot on fluorocarbon as well as monofilament is stronger to tie your hook on, but marginal compared to a figure of 8. I've used a figure of 8 all these years. They've never dropped me, never ever. Cut your tag. I always leave the tag a little bit like that. It's about 3 mil. And that's just to assist in holding foam or holding bait on your hook. And then the 40 centimeters I was talking about, you cut it off. Grab a swivel, important. I only use power swivels for this. And the reason for that is they are much smaller for the same strength compared to the normal swivels. Also figure of 8 knot. And there we're done. Okay. Now that's your basic trace you'll need to catch edibles and most species that don't have teeth. When it comes to sharks, obviously we use steel. With shad, we use steel. But for most edible and flatfish species, this is going to be your trace. This hook is right for blue rays, smaller eagles, smaller duckbills, all of that. This hook's perfect. If you know you're targeting, you're putting a big bait on, you're going to adapt your hook. If you're targeting bigger diamonds and honeycombs and bigger eagles, bigger duckbills, you'll use a 10 or 8 hook, and because it needs to suit the size of your bait. All right, but that's your general trace. Now there's two ways of tying this to your leader or your main line, and that depends on sometimes the fish you want to target or how you want to fish. Now with this very sharp hooks these days, chemically sharpened, when you're using a grapnel sinker like this, it's already sitting nicely in the sand. So most of the time when that fish, if he swallows, if your bait's nice, your bait presentation is nice, and he swallows this, as soon as he pulls it a little bit and it hits that sinker, this hook is set. Half the time you don't have to strike it, and that's when you're standing with your rod and just suddenly you feel it, whoop, and there it goes, before you could even strike. It pulls you flat, floorboard. Now that happens because of the chemically sharpened hooks. But if you want to fish a semi-slide, all right, now remember what I said earlier, for my sinker line I'll be using Maxima, and I make sure my sinker line is always a bit thinner than my main line, and you tie your sinker to that. For instance, I want to fish for steenbras, pignose grunter and the Cape Province as we know it. I'll tie a cone sinker, which I prefer. If the sea's not too rough, this is a nice edible sinker. It still rolls a little bit, just enough to roll off the side of a bank and present your bait for the fish where they'll be sitting feeding. And for casting and for distance, it's a very nice sinker. Now with this, I'm going to make sure it's longer than my actual hook line. Now if you don't want a semi-slide, you'll tie this straight to the swivel, the eye of the swivel that goes to your main line. So it keeps your swivel out like that to your hook. Alright, so both your sinker line and your main line goes onto the same eye of the swivel. But if you want to fish a semi-slide, I'm going to tie a swivel to my sinker line. Also using a figure of 8 knot here. For this thickness or diameter of line we're using, figure 8 is more than sufficient. It works very well. Cut the tag. Now I've got a separate sinker line, a sinker trace almost, if you want to call it. This, in other words, this is your leader line coming from your rod. Okay, so I'll put that through the eye of my sinker, which allows it now to slide on my main line. And then what will block it is the swivel to my hook. Now that gives you a semi-slide trace. Or not a semi-slide, that's a slide sinker trace. A semi-slide is if I add another swivel between my hook swivel, about 30 centimeters up on my leader line, and I allow my sinker only to slide for that 30 or 40 centimeters or how far you want it to slide. That's a semi-slide. The full slide in this case, this will now, on the leader line, coming from your rod, you've got your sinker, chuck that in the bowl. You've got your hook hanging here, and you've got your sinker line. So when a fish takes this, it can actually pull it without feeling the sinker. Now your very fussy feeders like your pignose grunter and your white steenbras or white steenbras in the Cape, they feel the bait before they swallow it, and that's typically where I'll use them. The cob are getting a bit more clever as well. I use them for cob as well. And then you need to still strike your fish. It's not going to use the sinker to set the hook. So when your rod goes down, you'll set the hook yourself, which you'll do in any case. It's just angler's instinct. So very simple, guys, 40 centimeters. That's a general trace you can use for everything. And what I meant with the diameter, you'll take this up. This is a 0.66 for general fishing. If you want to fish a bit more finesse, you can go to a 5.5 or a 6.0. And then targeting those bigger flatfish, I'll go up to 1 mil on your hook line, and in between the rocks as well. When you're fishing for reef fish or mussel cracker, if you're fishing for rockcod, all the fish that's in between the reefs that's going to cut you off, you take this up, sure, 0.90, 1 mil, even to a 1.1 mil would be advisable for your hook line. Then, like I mentioned before, your sinker line you'll make much thinner. And fishing between the rocks, guys, I still use a grapnel. And the reason I use a grapnel is the nylon or the steel one. Now, when you get stuck, the main thing, guys, lose a lot of sinkers in the rocks. You have to be very quick when you lift that first lift to get your sinker out, to get your trace out. You need to be quick with that and then reel fast to get it out, and you'll lose less sinkers and traces. But when this sits in the rocks like this, it fell in the water and sitting on the rocks. If it's stuck now, it gives you that one chance of unclipping when you pull it that first time to unclip, and here your sinker comes. So it gives you that additional chance of not getting stuck, and that's why I use them. And the same with the nylon ones, which obviously is actually a bit better because they don't unclip. They'll get to the next one, get stuck, and you'll be able to pull it out as well. Same reason. Now, what's nice about the nylon sinkers for sand, if you've got a very strong sea, you'll leave the nylon graps this long. But if your sea is not so strong, you can shorten them, and that you will do to get your trace and your bait to move around a bit. The main objective is you're putting your bait on, if you're fishing on sand, is to wash it off a bank into the gutter next to the bank, on the side of the bank where most of your predatory fish will lie and wait for food to wash off the bank. That's why banks is a good structure in the ocean to fish, and a bit of broken reef, because they ambush their fish. And on a bank with the water washing over, you've got fish sitting on the side of the bank waiting for whatever is washing off. Now, if you can get your bait on the side of the bank and let it hang on off the side, you're in the perfect spot. Or you want it to roll around a bit into that gully. Now, looking at the water, and we'll get to water reading a bit later on in our series, is if you've got a side wash and your water's washing from the right to the left, you're going to fish on the left of the bank, and vice versa. If you've got a pushing tide, the water is washing over the bank, you're going to fish in front of the bank on a pushing tide. If it's a pulling tide and the water is washing off the back of the bank more often, that's where your fish will sit, so you're going to cast there. Now, that's a very basic principle on fishing banks, and we'll get into detail with that. But yeah, guys, feel free to ask us questions if there's something you didn't understand. And thank you for watching our channel, and thank you for subscribing. Make sure you subscribe. In the near future, I'm going to give away weekly prizes for all our subscribers. So as soon as we get to that level, I'll share it with you guys, and make sure you subscribe.